much more severe than others. As time went on, the cows became less mutated, but that doesn't mean the effects went away. As the cows continued to graze on feed that was contaminated, the effects became more internal. This has led completely normal-looking cows near the exclusion zone to begin producing milk that is toxic and not fit for consumption. This is just one of the clear examples of how, even though the visible effects may have worn off, there are still lasting effects that we probably hadn't previously considered. In our number 9 spot today, we have barn swallows. Any animal who lives in the exclusion zone have been affected by the disaster, and that includes those who spend most of their time in the sky. I'm obviously talking about birds. The barn swallows in Chernobyl are one animal who have seen a change in their physical appearance that has lasted all of the years since the nuclear meltdown. It is unclear why these birds have been affected greater than their land animal counterparts, or if these changes will ever reverse to their previous state, but here's what they are currently dealing with. The swallows appeared to have severely deformed beaks, disproportionate feathers, some had partial albinism, and they were seen to have much smaller brains. Of course, some of these issues are much worse than others, and I'm sure these changes have significantly affected their ways of life, but of course they continue to adapt as time goes on. It is sad that this human-made disaster has affected them in such a negative way, but the fact that they are still around really shows their adaptability and resilience. In our number 8 spot today, we have boars. Boars are often seen wandering around the exclusion zone, but they also make their way into the surrounding towns as well, which is creating quite a problem. Boars are a fairly common food source, and it's not unusual to come across one, but here's the problem: if you live in the area, how are you supposed to tell which boars are radioactive and which aren't? Basically, you can't until it's too late. The boars who aren't radioactive might come across and intermingle with one who is, but they also like to eat mushrooms, and if they're searching for their food within the exclusion zone, it's a highly likely possibility that they'll find themselves eating a radioactive mushroom. This is posing quite a problem. In 2017, there was a study that found that approximately 1 out of every 3 boars that were killed in the nearby areas of Germany, which for the record isn't even that close to Chernobyl, have been found to be radioactive and super unsafe for human consumption. You'd think that being that far away would make you safe, but as we clearly now know, the effects of the disaster stretched far and wide. In our number 7 spot today, we have Przewalski's horse. These horses first originated in Mongolia and were wild horses that became endangered. They first became endangered due to hunters who would often kill the stallion, which of course would provide many difficulties in terms of reproduction. These horses weren't doing well in captivity, which made things even more difficult. This, combined with the harsh winters which would often claim their lives, left things looking quite grim for this species. In the late 1990s, however, in an effort to help repopulate these animals, 30 of them were released into the Ukrainian side of the exclusion zone, and it is believed that some of these original horses are actually still alive today, which is amazing, but camera trap images have also shown young horses, which means that they are repopulating, which is a huge win. Their expanding population in such a harsh environment could mean that they might potentially be able to return from the brink and go on to continue as a species, which is something we always want to see.
Starting us off at number 10 are Dewey's Old.
Are you tired of your YouTube channel not getting the attention it deserves? Building a YouTube channel can be a very lucrative and successful way to make new fans or sell your product or service. But without the proper YouTube promotion, your channel might just get likes from your mom. Thanks, Mom.
Favorite dolls. Remember this one? Yeah, so in case you missed a few of our other Chernobyl videos, there are large piles of creepy, most likely possessed, burned up, radioactive dolls everywhere. Where are they coming from? Well, odds are most of these are actually coming from tourists and people looking to grab that one spooky and scary pic for the gram, but no one knows how this all came to be. It's hard to know if this started from actual dolls that witnessed the explosion or if someone just had the bright idea one day to start adding messed up dolls all over the exclusion zone. In the end, we will never know, because unless you are a regular there at the exclusion zone, it's hard to distinguish which dolls have been there since day one and which ones are new additions. Either way, I hate all of it. At number 9, we have missing silver filters. Remember those pile of creepy dolls? Yeah, of course you do. It literally just freaking happened. Well, in addition to the piles of dead dolls, there are also piles of old gas masks everywhere, especially in one old school classroom. Some cheeky and hilarious, sick person even put some of these masks on dolls. Isn't that great? Anyway, what is mysterious about these gas masks is that these filters inside of all of them have been removed, and these filters contain just a small amount of silver in them, and what is most likely what happened is that looters came and took all of them. But what was done with the silver? No one really knows. If looters did indeed steal them, then I'm guessing that somewhere out there some people have radioactive jewelry or even silverware, because they most likely sold it. It's hard to say, but if any of you watching have your own Geiger meters at home right now, I would check it out on anything silver in your home, because you might just have a Chernobyl souvenir without even knowing it. At number 8, we have survivor immortality. While this one doesn't take place in Chernobyl exactly, it stems from Chernobyl. One Russian scientist who survived the explosion back in 1986 and 6 other Russian scientists have recently relocated to the small Greek island of Gatos. There is some conspiracy though, because some believe that these scientists actually relocated to the island to become immortal. Gavdos has 50 residents in total on the island, and it is believed to have mythical healing powers that make its residents immortal. Reporters from Vice interviewed a filmmaker who was making a documentary on the island and found out that the scientists work on various inventions from inside the local compound. They also have 7 acres of land that was given to them by a priest. Some think these Russian scientists are spies, while others believe they moved out there to not only become immortal themselves, but also clear them of all the radiation using the mystical powers of the island. They are apparently also building a temple named the Temple of Apollo. I think these guys were a little too close to the blast, if you know what I mean. At number 7, we have the random examination chair. Out in the middle of a wooded area in the exclusion zone is a random gynecologist's chair. How the hell did it get there? No one freaking knows. It can only be assumed that this chair was picked up by some local pranksters who went through the trouble of picking up this radioactive artifact and brought it to a random spot in the woods. But that is so much freaking work. I mean, guys, why? Aside from that, every other possibility is straight up terrifying. Maybe the blast blasted the chair out in the forest, but if it did, then why was there one of these chairs so close to a freaking radioactive reactor? See, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, it's just another unproven, less than appealing sight that can be found in the exclusion zone. At number 6, we have silhouettes. You may remember this one from one of my other Chernobyl videos too. The mystery here is we have no idea if these silhouettes are actually based on real people or if it's just a morbid art piece done by another Chernobyl creepy artist. New silhouettes show up all of the time, all over the town of Pripyat, and the only other mystery here is who is behind it. Is it one talented artist, or is it a group that has decided to take turns so no one ever gets the true answer? No matter what, these things sure do add to the creep factor of this ghost town, and I'm sure it's also a terrifying sight to see at night.
In our number 6 spot today, we have cats. In the rush of the evacuation, many pets were left behind in Chernobyl, and that of course includes cats. With little to do and of course more kittens being born, this paved the way for a group of feral cats to take over the exclusion zone. These cats wander in and out of the zone and find all of their favorite snacks, such as radioactive rodents or the less common radioactive insects. These cats certainly have had quite a difficult time surviving, as they are a perfect tasty snack for much larger predators and are certainly not equipped to deal with the harsh winters, but even still, there is said to be at least 100 stray cats living in the exclusion zone. There are efforts underway to have the uncontaminated ones put up for adoption, but the difficulty is in testing them and also re-domesticating these animals who have had to fend for themselves for so long. In our number 5 spot today, we have dogs. Since we just talked about the cats who were sadly left behind, it's only fair we talk about the dogs too. It's strange that these 2 domesticated animals would have such different experiences after the disaster, but they absolutely have. There are far more dogs who have managed to survive throughout the years than cats, but that is most likely due to the fact that they aren't as easy to catch and eat as prey as cats are. But dogs have a whole other challenge, and that is they have a hard time hunting and feeding themselves. There are workers who continue to work the dangerous job at the plant, and they continually feed the dogs living in the zone, which is something that truthfully is so nice to hear. It is also said that there are dogs living in this area that have begun mating with wolves, which is only going to breed dogs that will be more likely to be able to survive on their own, which I suppose is a good thing. Similar to the cats, many of the stray dogs are being studied to see if they can be adopted into homes outside of the zone so that they don't have to continue living in these harsh environments that they really were not bred for. In our number 4 spot today, we have European gray wolves. One of the species of animals that has been thriving ever since the disastrous nuclear meltdown has been the European gray wolf. Due to the lack of humans in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, they have been able to thrive and it has been said that the wolves in this area actually have a population that is 7 times higher than that of comparable sites. Researchers are still trying to figure out exactly why this is happening, but it has obviously shown them that despite the effects of radiation in humans, the radiation clearly isn't affecting the wildlife's ability to reproduce. So this seems like just a regular gray wolf, but here's where things get a little different. Just because the wolves seem to be doing fine doesn't mean they aren't radioactive. These wolves, since they're such a high population, are beginning to travel farther and spread out more, which creates quite a problem. Not that we're just going up and petting wolves, but if you did come in contact with one of these wolves, you'd be getting a high dose of radiation just by touching them. Touching a carcass of these wolves with bare hands is absolutely not recommended. So while it is absolutely incredible to see the wildlife doing so well in this zone, we are now faced with an entirely different issue that we haven't really ever had before. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Eurasian lynx. This one is on this list for a different reason than most. It isn't because of anything this animal is or isn't doing, but instead is due to the fact that this animal was once believed to have entirely disappeared from Europe. It was fairly recently in 2014 that researchers realized they had made a comeback in a big way. Similar to most of the animals we've talked about today, the Eurasian lynx has been able to thrive due to the lack of human population and interference. Their downfall was attributed to urbanization as well as hunters, and they were mostly wiped out in the early 20th century, although they remained in certain parts of Siberia. There is still a lot more research that needs to be done about these creatures to determine exactly how radioactive they are, and this will take time due to the dangers of the zone they reside in, as well as the nature of these creatures in general. But just being able to see that an animal that was struggling has been able to make such a comeback is probably one of the best things to come out of such a horrible disaster. In our number 2 spot today, we have bison. Bison are right up there with wolves for most dangerous radioactive animal, and that is due to their size, as well as the fact that they are a source of food for some. These huge animals can weigh up to 2,200 pounds and are certainly not an animal.
Our universe is vast, full of challenges and opportunities, and you are at its center, with the power to shape it. This can all seem daunting, but the Air Career Program is here to assist you. It will guide you and help you answer the question, what can I do next? The Air Career Program will introduce you to 4 major academy careers.
You ain't gonna come back and forth.
Will guide you in exploring the vast landscape of professions. Along your journey towards mastering your skills, you will always have complete
looking at yourself
freedom
like that.
to switch to a new path.
She looking at herself in the mirror like she's trying to look back at it.
Most.
You heard
There
me?
has never been a better time to start on your path
Yeah.
to glory.
I said she was looking at herself in the mirror like that.
Play War Thunder now. Join millions of players across the globe in massive battles on tanks, aircraft, and helicopters in the most extensive vehicle combat game ever made.
Come here. Over here.
Take control over the battlefield in ground vehicles, rain down rocket volleys in helicopters,
Come here, no.
your enemies in
that
aircraft,
the
and bomb whatever is
Yeah.
left into the dust. Play on more than 1,500 authentic military vehicles from early World War II to present day. Experience the transition from historic biplane fighters and iconic World War II tanks to supersonic jets and modern battle tanks fighting alongside attack helicopters. Upgrade your vehicles, customize their appearance, and level up your crew to become the best commander on the battlefield. Download War Thunder now for free on warthunder.com for PS4 or Xbox One.
that is easily messed with. Many bison weren't affected by the radiation immediately, and instead it became much more of an issue once they started eating food that had been contaminated. They like to feed on grass, and a lot of it, and the radiation didn't only affect animal life, but plant life as well, making their food source a literal feeding ground for radioactive material. Similar to the wolves we talked about before, running into these guys isn't only a threat now because of their size, but now because if you get too close, you could be facing some unsafe levels of radiation. In our number 1 spot today, we have spiders. I've talked about my hatred for spiders a lot on this channel, but to be honest, they keep doing cool things, so I have to keep talking about them. Okay, well maybe this one is less cool and more scary, but still, they deserved a spot. Spiders that are residing within the exclusion zone are of course radioactive, but it's not only the spiders that are now dangerous to touch, but it is also their webs. Spiders in Chernobyl are literally making radioactive webs, which is the stuff straight out of a comic book. These radioactive webs are also being woven in much different ways than they were before, which would suggest some sort of genetic mutation at play. Spiders were already a creature I'd like to stay far, far away from, but radioactive spiders really adds a whole other level. Not only are the spiders now dangerous for non-radioactive animals to touch, but walking through their web is equally as dangerous to those who aren't thriving in the radiation. So not only do you have to watch out for the regular old radioactive material, but now also the never-ending construction of radioactive webs. Great.
Coming in at our halfway point at number 5, we have a Chernobyl cover-up. In a documentary titled The Russian Woodpecker, Fyodor Alexandrovich explains a conspiracy theory that the Chernobyl blast was actually orchestrated to cover up the failure of the Russian woodpecker. Now, it wasn't a Russian bird or the Russian version of Woody the Woodpecker. The Russian woodpecker was actually an array radar that was meant to detect missiles before they were launched. The device was named after its woodpecker-like sound it would make during its operation. It cost 7 billion rubles and unfortunately did not work. It is suspected that it didn't work because of the northern lights messing with its signals, but it can't be for certain. So instead of suffering this terrible embarrassment, the Chernobyl plant that was known for its instability blew up, distracting everyone from the failure of the woodpecker. It's hard to say how likely all of this is, but when shooting the woodpecker documentary, apparently some pretty weird stuff happened to the documentary crew, such as visits from secret police services, as well as even one crew member being shot by a hidden sniper during the Euromaidan protests. Whatever the truth is here, it sounds like they were putting their nose where it wasn't wanted. At number 4, we have no containment building. Back in 1986, when the Chernobyl explosion actually happened, there was quite mysteriously no containment building that surrounded the reactors. Usually there are containment structures around radioactive places, like the reactors located in Chernobyl. They are gas-tight structures that are usually made of steel reinforced concrete, so it can confine fission products that could release into the atmosphere during an accident if one were to happen. Sure enough, we all know that one happened here, and interestingly enough, it was not prepared for an accident that dangerous. According to author Richard Mueller of the book Physics for Future Presidents, The Science Behind the Headlines, if there would have been a containment unit around the reactors, Mueller believes that there would have been virtually no deaths. Interesting. I wonder if this coincides with any of the conspiracy of the Russian woodpecker as mentioned before. Maybe. Starting us off in our top 3, at number 3, we have alien saviors. In this case, they quite literally came in peace. An eyewitness by the name of Mikhail Voritsky claimed to have seen a large fireball of light hovering above the reactor on the night of the explosion. Later on September 16th of 1989, apparently there was another huge radiation leak, and it is reported that this same ball of light was seen in the exact same spot once again. Many believe it to be aliens that were actually protecting us from the radioactive blast. Some claim that the blast was nowhere near as big as what it could have been, and that these aliens actually helped absorb and clean up whatever extra radiation that they could to save us. You know me, I'm all about the alien theories, but I'm not sure about this one. I will say, many say similar events happened during the Fukushima accident as well. Oh well, aliens, if you are listening to me right now and you did help us, thank you. Now, show yourself. At number 2, we had the Blackbird of Chernobyl. In April of 1986, right before the explosion in July, many reported seeing a large creature that looked like a blackbird flying around Chernobyl. This creature was large with red glowing eyes and was compared to America's legend, the Mothman. Why? What's so similar between a large Mothman and a large blackbird? Well, both of these creatures had large glowing red eyes, as well as both showed up right before major events. The Mothman appeared and was spotted right before the Silver Bridge collapse in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, Virginia in 1967, which reportedly killed 46 people. Some survivors of the Chernobyl blast reported seeing this giant scary creature fly away from the reactor after the blast. Many believe that this bird was a paranormal entity that was a harbinger of terrible things to come. Others believe it was just a large stork. I don't know what to believe here, but the idea of a giant paranormal creature that is similar to the one that was seen in the US 20 years before gives me goosebumps in the best way possible. I love monster and ghost lore, which is what brings us to our #1 spot. And finally, coming in at #1, we have my favorite, ghosts. That's right, not just named a ghost town because it's abandoned, but also because there are many different spirits that are said to be found here. Andrei Karsukov, a nuclear physicist from New York, told one story after his visit to the area back in 1997. Karsukov reports that he went to the power station one day at 7:30 a.m. and visited the #4 reactor in the sarcophagus. You know, the big containment unit structure that they should have had on there before the explosion? Yeah, that thing. Well, he could not go inside due to the high levels of radiation, but once he was down there, he could hear screams coming from the inside due to a fire. So what did he do? He ran upstairs to the control room to get help, and once he barged open the door, he was told that he was the first person to open that door in 3 years. He was also told that the only way in was where he was, and if someone came in after him, they would have tripped the alarm. So it was impossible for anyone else to be down there except him. There was also a floodlight that turned on and off at very strange moments, leading the crew to believe someone or something was in the building with them. But what was it? I don't know. You be the judge.
Starting off this countdown, we have the residents. Believe it or not, but there are people that still live in Chernobyl, even though it's highly dangerous to do so. It's estimated that there are around 130 to 150 people currently living there. Many of them are older women. In fact, they have been given the name Chernobyl's babushkas. Now, you may be wondering, how do they live there when there's no operating grocery store and stuff like that? Well, they live off of the land. They are still farming their family's land. The thing is, the water and soil there is still highly contaminated. So why would they take this risk? Well, one of the elderly ladies featured in the documentary about Chernobyl's babushkas said, and I quote, "Radiation doesn't scare me. Starvation does." After the nuclear disasters, these ladies fled their home, but over the years they have all come back. Despite there being no hospitals or grocery stores, they don't care. They just want to be on their homeland. And turns out their bodies have somewhat adjusted to the high levels of radiation there. In our 9th spot, we have the radioactive animals. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up. The nuclear power plant explosion had a lasting effect on the animals in the area. First off, families had to flee their home and leave their pets behind. As a result, a number of stray dogs that are descendants of those dogs still roam the area. But it's not safe to pet them, no matter how cute they are. And sadly, because of their exposure to the radiation, they don't live a long life. And many of them have health issues. Another animal that is highly radioactive there are the boars. This is because they eat grubs, tubers, and roots in the soil where the radioactive isotopes have settled. Not only that, but birds and rodents have
This was
item right
when he
there. I
was
missed it.
6 months old. We wonder how he looks today as he marks his first birthday while being held in brutal captivity in Gaza by the cruel Hamas. Happy birthday, Kfir. We hope to see you soon.
That's me beating him up.
You don't have to learn complicated software to make professional videos like this. Pictory has a popular script-to-video tool that uses AI to transform your script into a video, complete with stock footage, fancy captions, background music, and even AI voiceovers, all with the click of a few buttons. What we want is the first tool called Script-to-Video. When you're ready to get started, click the Proceed button here. Then paste the text for your script here in the box below. Pictory AI is now reading your script and automatically selecting your visuals for each scene. Quickly change any captions or visuals to add even more polish to your videos. And don't worry, upgrading to any paid plan removes all of the watermarks on your final video. You can quickly edit scene captions by clicking on them and changing the text. On the right half of the screen, you'll see the video preview area. You can preview it or you can download it. Nice. Remember, your first video doesn't have to be perfect. Just do your best to make a quick video today and then come share it inside our official Pictory Creators Facebook group to get friendly feedback and helpful tips from our team and other creators just like you.
been found with tumors and cataracts, all from being exposed to the radiation in the area. Coming in at number 8, we have the creepy doll beds. There are a bunch of people who go around Chernobyl purposely trying to make it creepier. They have been given the name the disaster tourists. They have been known to take creepy old dolls and place them on windowsills or hang them from buildings, etc. They also did this really creepy thing in an abandoned school. They rearranged a kindergarten classroom and placed a doll on every single one of those dilapidated beds. That literally looks like something straight out of a horror movie. Seriously, out of all the abandoned places there, that one looks like it would for sure be haunted. In our 7th spot today, we have the ghostly figure. There are tons of ghosts that haunt Chernobyl. I mean, any place where a huge tragedy takes place is bound to be haunted. In this case, the ghost was captured on live TV. So Sci-Fi Channel's Destination Truth went to Chernobyl and conducted a number of paranormal investigations. They even went to Reactor 4. While there, they saw a human figure appear on a thermal imaging camera. They believe that that is the soul of a worker that died from the explosion. They also checked out a number of abandoned hospitals and saw multiple figures moving throughout the hospital on the thermal imaging camera as well. Isn't that spooky? Moving on to number 6, we have the elephant's foot. The elephant's foot is a large mass of black poria. It's given the name the elephant's foot because it's shaped sort of like an elephant's foot. Now, this thing is highly deadly. It emits high levels of radiation. Anyone exposed to it for minutes could die from radiation poisoning. And guess what? Although it's not as active as it was back in the day, it is still generating heat and still melting down into the base of Chernobyl. The scariest part, if it comes in contact with water, another explosion could occur. Now, eventually the elephant's foot will cool on its own, but even then it will still remain highly radioactive. And no one should ever go near it. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the raccoon dog. This is a really freaking weird animal found in Chernobyl. When people first saw it, they actually thought the radiation caused a dog and a raccoon to just fuse together. Basically, they are found all throughout the exclusion zone, and they are thriving there. It's crazy to see how they have adapted to live in a highly radioactive area. Now, these things are freaking cute. In fact, they are the most observed animals in that area by scientists. Coming in at number 4, we have the firebugs. These are tiny but deadly radioactive bugs. They were discovered back in 2011 when 2 friends were out collecting flowers in the exclusion zone. Don't worry, they were doing this for scientific reasons, you know, to study the pollen, not to just create a deadly radioactive bouquet of flowers. Anyways, while doing so, they came across these firebugs. They then went around collecting hundreds of these bugs, some from areas with higher levels of radiation and some from areas with lower radiation levels. In the end, they found that those exposed to higher levels of radiation had deformities. I mean, yeah, just as you suspected. Either way, you don't want those bad boys crawling on your skin for a number of reasons. In our 3rd spot today, we have the mutated wolves. The wolves from Chernobyl are another animal that are most commonly studied by scientists. In fact, some have been tagged with GPS collars to help track the levels of radioactivity there. Here's the thing. There was this whole scary legend going around that the wolves living there got mutated and were now highly aggressive and massive in size. There were stories being told of these massive wolves hunting down humans and attacking any and every animal. Turns out that this was false. But here's something interesting. Scientists believe that the wolves there have been mating with the dogs there, and in the end, they're creating these large dogs that look like wolves. It's pretty interesting. I want a wolf dog. Another interesting thing is that research has shown that the radiation isn't really affecting them. In fact, the wolf population is thriving there. As a result, they have concluded that humans have a greater negative impact on animals' lives than radiation does. Isn't that insane? It is said that there are around 300 wolves living in the exclusion zone. But again, like all the animals mentioned on this list, they are highly radioactive and dangerous to get close to or even pet. Coming in at number 2, we have the tombs. This is one of the saddest things at Chernobyl. But basically, a number of individuals that got exposed to the radioactive materials and died had to be buried in basically a big concrete coffin. Let's take a look at a man named Vasily Ignatenko. On that day, he went to the roof of the power plant to extinguish the fires. Sadly, he was exposed to a lethal dose of radiation and passed away. He was only 25. Now, his body was still radioactive. So Vasily, along with 27 other firefighters, were buried under big amounts of zinc and concrete. They did this to protect the public from the radiation emitting from their bodies. They were buried all around the reactor. It's really sad that they didn't really get a proper burial. I mean, they couldn't. It was too dangerous to go near their bodies. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Blackbird of Chernobyl. According to some survivors of this accident, they claim that shortly before the nuclear plant meltdown, they all experienced nightmares. They also received threatening phone calls and had encountered a huge winged bird creature. Legend goes that these were all warning signs that the disaster was going to happen. The creature they saw was a large creature like a man with huge wings and red eyes. Some even claim they saw it over one of the reactors as it went through the meltdown. This creature has been given the name the Blackbird of Chernobyl. So legend goes, if you were in Chernobyl and you see this creature, then something bad is going to happen.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the disaster. We talk a lot about Chernobyl, but how often do we really discuss how this disaster actually happened in the first place? What actually went on that caused it? The Chernobyl nuclear disaster occurred on April 26, 1986 in Ukraine, which at the time was a part of the Soviet Union. During a routine safety test, a series of errors and design flaws led to an explosion in reactor 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The explosion caused a massive fire that released radioactive material into the atmosphere, which was carried by wind across Ukraine, Belarus, and other parts of Europe. The disaster was caused by a combination of factors, including a flawed reactor design, a lack of safety, and human error. During the safety test, the reactor's power output dropped to dangerously low levels, leading to an attempt to restore power that resulted in a sudden surge. This caused the reactor to overheat, leading to a steam explosion that destroyed the reactor's upper structure. The accident caused immediate deaths due to the explosion, as well as long-term health effects from exposure to radiation. The Chernobyl disaster remains the worst nuclear accident in history in terms of the number of deaths and the environmental impact. It led to significant changes in nuclear safety regulations and increased awareness of the potential risks of nuclear power. In our number 9 spot today, we have the operator. This story is one that comes directly from Alexei Brius, who is a control room operator at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, and this is his story of the day of the disaster, which starts as he was traveling on a bus to work on April 26, 1986, knowing nothing of the historic disaster that occurred just hours before. As he arrived, he thought, quote, "It looked like it would be a mass grave. I was sure that the whole night shift had died there." He continued on to say, quote, "At the moment of the explosion, I was in Pripyat in my flat. I was sleeping tightly. I didn't hear, I didn't see anything. In the morning, I was to go to work, and so I did. I knew nothing about the disaster. I just got on a bus and went to work. As I was coming close to the station, I saw from the bus that the block was destroyed. I always say that my hair stood on its end when I saw that. I didn't understand why me and other workers were brought there, but it turned out that there was still much work to be done. Me and my coworkers got off the bus and tried to enter the territory of the 4th block as we were supposed to. There was a guard wearing a rubber-coated army suit who had orders not to let anyone in. Finally, they agreed. The guarding sergeant gave us each a pill of potassium iodide. I took it immediately. It was a special medicine made to protect the thyroid gland from radiation. All my life, I remember him with gratitude. The upper part of the reactor and the separator barrel were open. The main circulating pump was seen from the outside. Down the reactor, I saw the reactor's emergency cooling system all ruined. Its pieces were mixed with slabs of concrete. I was stepping over lumps of black graphite. I didn't want to admit what I saw, just like many other people, that it was black graphite. Alexei goes on to explain that he and the other operators had to, quote, "save those injured by fire, debris, hot water, and steam and radiation. We were to find them, carry them out, and deliver them to the medical personnel and go look for others. We saved and brought everybody out except for one person. He is still somewhere there inside the reactor." In our number 8 spot today, a bit of a break in the really dark story, we have cows. Alright, cows can cheer anybody up. The area around Chernobyl was known for its agriculture before the disaster, so of course that means there were definitely a lot of cows that could be found. While many people who were forced to evacuate had to leave their animals behind, since farm animals are not only expensive but can also be used as a source of income, many people took their farm animals with them. Unfortunately, however, many of these animals had already been exposed to the radiation in some capacity, and while it didn't affect them right away, the newer generations saw much more of the effects. In 1989, many farmers began reporting birth defects in their animals, some being much more severe than others. As time went on, the cows became less mutated, but that doesn't mean the effects went away. As the cows continued to graze on feed that was contaminated, the effects became more internal. This has led to completely normal-looking cows near the exclusion zone to begin producing milk that is toxic and not fit for consumption. While some of the outside and more visible effects of the radiation has worn off, there are still many, many unseen effects that continue to be prevalent today. In our number 7 spot today, we have the liquidators. In the immediate aftermath of the disaster, Soviet authorities sent in robots to help with the cleanup efforts in the most hazardous areas. This was an amazing idea until the robots quickly became damaged or destroyed by the high levels of radiation in the environment. The robots faced several challenges, including damage to their electronic components and problems with their movement systems. The high levels of radiation also made it difficult for the robots to function, as the radiation would interfere with the robots' sensors and their controls. Of course, with robots out of the picture, humans were the ones who continued with the cleanup efforts. Known as liquidators, these people were primarily Soviet military personnel, firefighters, and volunteers who were tasked with containing the radioactive material and preventing further contamination, and they faced extreme danger and were exposed to high levels of radiation. Many of these people were working without proper protective gear and in close proximity to the highly radioactive material. Despite these dangers, the liquidators worked tirelessly to contain the disaster and prevent further harm. Many of the liquidators suffered from acute radiation sickness, with symptoms including nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Long-term health effects including cancer and other illnesses have also been reported among the liquidators. The liquidators played a very vital role in preventing further harm from the Chernobyl disaster, and they are often referred to as heroes for their bravery and their sacrifice. Many have received recognition and awards for their efforts, but many continue to suffer from the long-term health effects of their exposure to the radiation. In our number 6 spot today, we have the abandoned amusement park. The Pripyat amusement park, located in the town of Pripyat in Ukraine, was set to open on May 1st, 1986, just days after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. The park was intended to be a celebration of the town's prosperity and the Soviet Union's technological achievements, but it never opened its doors to the public due to the disaster. The park features a Ferris wheel, bumper cars, a carousel, and other rides, which still stand today as an eerie reminder of the town's abandoned past. The Ferris wheel is particularly haunting, with rusted and decaying carts. The amusement park was never fully completed, and its rides were never tested or operated, and today it serves as a chilling symbol of the devastating impact of the Chernobyl disaster on the town and its people. Despite the danger posed by the high levels of radiation in the area, the Pripyat amusement park has become a popular destination for tourists seeking to witness the haunting beauty of the abandoned rides and the town itself. In our number 5 spot today, we have The Pilot. This is another first-hand account from right after the disaster, and this one comes from Igor Pismensky, who was a helicopter navigator following the disaster. After the meltdown, helicopter crews were sent out to try and spread decontamination materials over the site. One of these crews was actually killed trying to do this work after they crashed at the site. Of the disaster, Igor said, quote, "They told us there had been an explosion at the plant, so they needed our help. The mission was, after the firemen, to drop down loads of stuff from helicopters to the destroyed reactor. First sand, then lead, dolomite, boron. We would load up about 15 kilometers distance from the reactor. They would put sandbags into parachutes, then we would take off and pass around in a conveyor fashion. There would be a circle of up to 40 helicopters in the air, which would fly over and right above the reactor every 2 to 3 minutes. No one opened the windows. The chopper was all shut, but it was not airtight. It was not protected against radiation. The view of the destroyed reactor down below, after the main fire had been put out, you could see separate glowing reddish fire beds in the first days. This was the view from the height of 200 meters. Of course, we knew this was dangerous, but what we did not have was adequate protective gear for the mission, but that's the responsibility of those who sent us there. Radiation is considered invisible. It cannot be seen, but you can feel it. That is, you can feel a certain metallic taste in your mouth and a sore throat. Radiation never passes without a trace, so the consequences are always there, and radiation usually hits precisely those parts of the body that are the most vulnerable. So for everyone who's gone through Chernobyl, there are consequences. I remember so well the first time we flew over Pripyat town. The whole town had been evacuated by then, but everything looked sort of surreal. Linen is hanging on laundry lines, on balconies, you see dropped bicycles, abandoned cars, no life around, all people gone, but their stuff is still there. When the catastrophe happened, there was the Soviet Union. We had 15 constituent republics playing their part in handling this mess. Today, no country in the world would be in a position to handle the problem of this magnitude if it happened again. In our number 4 spot today, we have the elephant's foot. The elephant's foot is a highly radioactive mass of corium that was formed during the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. It is named after its shape, which resembles that of an elephant's foot. The corium was formed when the reactor's core melted down, causing a mixture of melted nuclear fuel, concrete, and other materials to form into a highly radioactive mass. The elephant's foot is estimated to have had a temperature of around 2,700 degrees Celsius at the time of the accident and emitted lethal levels of radiation.
Because I keep going back and forth.
Tried to remove
Like, I don't
the
know.
elephant's foot from the reactor died within weeks due
That
to
one
the
blue
radiation
teleporter
exposure.
shit is
Today, the
annoying.
elephant's foot remains extremely radioactive and is still inaccessible. It is estimated to be one of the most dangerous objects in the world, with exposure to it resulting in almost certain
that brings
death
me back
within
over to
minutes.
the
In our number
where I
3
got
spot
that
today, we have
Tennessee about
Kopachi. Kopachi was a village in Ukraine that was affected by the disaster. The village was situated close to the nuclear power plant, and its residents were exposed to high levels of radiation. To contain the spread of contamination, the Soviet government ordered the evacuation and burial of the village, including
We found Sprizzy through a Google search, pretty much. I was looking for a way to market our YouTube
Well, I think I
videos
found it anyway, but I was
and
asking you which teleporters am I supposed to
call it the
take
correct
because
manner.
I'm like
Sprizzy's
back and
something
forth on this
completely
one.
different. What
Well, I
Sprizzy
was
does
trying to
is they have a
grind a little
network
bit anyway
of
because last time
places
that
where
little
they use
pink
your
hair,
video
that little purple
They put your video
bitch
in front
with
of
the
people that need to see
pigtails
it,
killed me.
and that are going to come back and continue to consume your content. And man, it's been great.
You know, the
They're
one
super responsive.
little girl that turned into
They've
that
been
demon.
Nothing but helpful to us, and this has been nothing but a good experience. So check out Sprizzy if you're trying to get some extra views, extra subscribers that are going to last, and they're not just that fake made up stuff. So we're at 444. I think at the beginning.
burying the contaminated soil under a layer of clean soil. Today,
shit.
Kopachi remains abandoned and designated as
oh,
a
I
part of
did,
the
yeah.
exclusion zone around the Chernobyl
I miss
plant.
you, I
The
miss
village
you.
and
I'll
surrounding
play
area
this
serve
game.
as a
Not
reminder
today,
of the
not today.
devastating consequences
Final
of
Fantasy
nuclear
loaded.
disasters and the importance of nuclear safety. In our number 2 spot today, we have the plant. It might come as a surprise, but the Chernobyl nuclear plant didn't just shut down entirely after the disaster. Despite the contamination and the risks associated, they continued to use the plant for years to come. Reactor 4, which exploded during the accident, was completely destroyed, and the other reactors were shut down over time. The Soviet government continued to use parts of the plant for several years to generate electricity and heat for the surrounding area,
trying
but
to level
eventually
up
the
Tiger
plant
Blade.
was
I forgot
decommissioned.
what comes
It wasn't
after
until
the,
December of
Tiger,
2000 that the final reactor,
Blade.
Reactor 3, was shut down.
I
Reactor
don't know
2
why I
was
was about
shut
to say
down in
Tiger Uppercut, but
1991,
it's a
and
Street
1
Fighter.
was shut down in 1996. It is thought that the plant should be fully out of use by 2028. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the containment. After the disaster took place, the damaged reactor, reactor number 4, was sealed in a heavy concrete sarcophagus that was meant to keep the radiation concealed and contained. While this may seem like a foolproof plan, there are many debates about how effective this containment actually is and how effective it may or may not continue to be. These are, of course, super important questions, and considering the fact that it's something we've never really had to deal with before in any way, how are we really supposed to know until we try? The building of a new structure called the New Safe Confinement Structure started in 2006, and it was completed in 2017. The new structure is 843 feet wide,
Yeah, you see,
531
Rain
feet
more
long,
than
and
Genius, but
356
I
feet
kinda
tall,
like
and is
Genius
meant to
too,
keep
you
the
know?
reactor
But, like, I'ma
and its
switch it up once I
previous
get the ninja
sarcophagus
bits.
contained for at least the
I
next
be forgetting her
100
name.
years. Despite that relatively short amount of time, experts say that the exclusion zone and surrounding area will remain uninhabitable for the next 20,000 years.
Starting us off at number 10 is an abandoned carnival. Now, I have always known carnivals to be very upbeat and happy places, but I think it's safe to say after toxic radiation, they ain't so fun. Just a mile and a quarter away from the Chernobyl power plant is the small town of Pripyat. Pripyat was the town where most workers at Chernobyl lived and raised their families prior to the famous blast. Obviously, that is not the case anymore. What is now left of this once popular carnival is a decaying Ferris wheel, bumper cars surrounded by overgrown vines, and an old rusty skeleton of a merry-go-round. It is said that the amusement park was set to open on May 1st, just 5 days after the Chernobyl incident occurred, but the people of Pripyat needed something to do while the reactor was melting down, so the town opened up the amusement park on April 27th. How charming. Nothing more sweet and fun than you and your family enjoying a beautiful Ferris wheel ride that sweeps in and out of toxic radiation. It's the little things in life.
In our ninth spot today, we have the ghosts. A number of people lost their lives over this terrible disaster, and it's believed that their souls are still around, haunting Pripyat. This one story in particular will give you the chills. It was told by nuclear physicist Andrei Karsukov. He visited the area in 1997 and claims he encountered a ghost. So when he arrived, he went to the power station and went to the number 4 reactor. That's where the explosion occurred. Now, he was there taking radiation readings when all of a sudden he heard someone screaming for rescue from a fire coming from inside. He said that it was impossible for someone to be inside of the old reactor room. For starters, the door requires a password and a handprint. And not only that, it would have tripped an alarm if someone managed to get inside.
Yeah,
Yet,
man.
the screaming was clearly coming from
Because
inside.
Genius
It
has
sounded
no
like
healing
someone
moves
was desperately
whatsoever.
trying
His
to
magic
escape.
is strong, don't get me
So
wrong,
he might
but
have heard the ghostly cries from someone
with
who
just
lost
Kratos
their
healing,
life in the power
sometimes
plant
that's like,
explosion.
that shit would take
Isn't that
toll.
scary? I think so.
Number 8, silhouettes of missing townspeople. Before I go any further on this one, let me just say that these silhouettes are not actually of real people left after the blast. A couple of sneaky and daring graffiti artists said to be from Germany and Belarus snuck into the radiation zone and thought it would be a good idea to spray paint silhouettes of people who once lived in this beautiful little community. So these pieces more or less resemble what once was rather than resembling actual humans from the town. That being said, there are some unique silhouettes through the radiation zone, such as a little girl with pigtails reaching for a light switch in a random abandoned room. Somewhere outside, a boy pulling a truck towards a corner of the building, as well as silhouettes of random people dancing, and to finish it off, a small group of children jumping together in terror of the blast. Pretty morbid, if you ask me. Whether these silhouettes are based on specific real people or not, these random silhouettes are definitely a haunting thing to see, and I don't want to see them.
Coming in at number 7, we have the Bloody Red. The Bloody Red, or the Red Forest, is the name given to the forest area around Chernobyl. Why is it called that? Well, this area received a lot of radiation fallout. As a result, the trees turned this bright orange color and then died. Nowadays, not a single tree can grow there anymore. In fact, this area is considered the most radioactive land area on the planet. Yes, on the planet. Obviously, as a result, the 400 hectares of land are off limits. It's strictly prohibited to go in there. I mean, duh, unless you have a death wish and want to die from exposure to radiation. What's also scary is that in 2015, a fire broke out in the forest, and even more radioactive material was released from this burning. So yeah, that forest is a big no-go zone. Also, could they have given it a creepier name, like the Bloody Red? Really? Really?
Coming in at number 6 are piles of creepy dolls. Creepy dolls! I have seen plenty of horror films in my time, and nothing creeps me out more than a creepy, probably possessed old doll. All through Pripyat, piles of dolls and doll heads can be seen in the randomest of places. Everywhere from windowsills, piles of debris, bed frames, tree branches, literally everywhere. Now, some of these dolls may be left over from the blast, but odds are they are all placed there by cheeky horror fans wanting to place their own touch on the Chernobyl site. Some of these are even propped up in specific poses with gas masks on. Annabelle, if you're watching this, you stay in your glass box. You got that?
We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Hospital of Death. This is said to be the deadliest hospital on the planet. So after the nuclear disaster, this hospital began quickly filling up with a number of sick and injured citizens. Nowadays though, obviously the hospital is abandoned. But the basement of the hospital contains a dark secret. In the basement, there are piles of first responders' clothing. These clothings belonged to the first responders like the firemen who were on the scene immediately after the explosion. Obviously, the clothing they wore when they rushed into the building is now highly contaminated, and still to this day emit dangerously high levels of radiation. So they were just dumped in the basement because they didn't know where else to get rid of it. In fact, the radiation in this building is 4,000 times higher than normal. It's crazy.
Number 4, radiation-eating fungus. In the words of Jeff Goldblum, life finds a way. Currently, there is a fungus growing inside the damaged 4th reactor of Chernobyl where radiation levels are still insanely high. Discovered by scientists back in 2002, this fungus, when tested, showed that when exposed to higher ionizing radiation,
one more
it would
hour.
actually grow
I want to see
faster.
things.
What happened to the tested fungus after? Who knows? Either way,
Hello,
I
Fresh.
wish I could
Be
have been
fresh
there
and
to
say
test the
hello.
other scientists because I hear they were some pretty fun guys.
No, you think they're gonna jack that?
In our third spot today, we have
Dude, what the
Shopify
fuck,
has
bro?
everything you need to grow your retail business, like fast and secure checkout, reliable card readers, and one place to track all your in-store and online sales. Start your free trial today at www.shopify.com/retailpos.
Winter sales now live on G2A.com. Take a thrilling sled ride through the hottest digital deals of the season. Visit the event now and get your keys cheaper.
the mutated animals. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster had devastating, lasting effects. The nuclear material leaked into the soil, contaminating food and water. In fact, the radioactive materials leaked into pastures and was eaten by cows, and then was later found in their milk that children were drinking. But let's talk more about these farm animals that were affected. There were tons of weird mutated animals born near the disaster zone after this incident. Pigs, goats, and horses were born with messed up faces and extra limbs, or were just weird colors. Nowadays, there's a lot of stray dogs that roam the area. Sadly, because of their exposure to the radiation,
God damn, it took me forever to find it.
And they may have a number of health issues.
Yeah, it's the permaculture ranch.
I'm
trying to find chocolate. I think that's chocolate right there.
Chernobyl. Tourists. Apparently, around
forever to
12,000
find them.
tourists visit the exclusion zone every single year.
Yeah, watch, I'm telling you, bro, all this shit is about to happen pretty soon.
With a respirator and a dosimeter.
Because you gotta remember, this is akin to like the Hunger Games also, you feel me? But it's added, you know, special powers and
Don't bring
angels
them
and
into
shit.
the hotel with you once you return. No matter how safe or unsafe
I'm
you
gonna
think
find
it is
out
to
my
visit
son
the
Lloyd was
exclusion
half
zone,
angel the whole time.
Obviously, thousands of
Probably
people
told his
from
pa
around the
dukes.
world go and visit every single year. Honestly, it does.
Yo,
seem
I'm not gonna
kinda
hold you. When
cool,
I
and
found
I'm
that
sure
out,
there's a
that's
gift
like
shop
a
somewhere
part
that
of
sells
like
shirts that say, "I'm
you
on the
know,
way to Chernobyl, and I got
the
with
game
this shirt
verse
and an extra
that
thumb."
like really touched me, bro. Like, oh, this nigga, get him, cuz.
Okay.
This nigga was your
And
pops
in
the
our
whole
one spot
time.
today, we
Everything you
have
went through,
the
my nigga.
Stalkers. This is absolutely insane. I don't think you guys are ready for this one. But the Stalkers is the name given to a group of Russians and Ukrainians that romanticize the apocalyptic environment of Pripyat. They sneak into abandoned buildings and explore them. Sometimes they even sleep over there. Also, to make matters weirder, they bring a gauger counter to see how much radiation they were exposed to on their journeys. Not only that, but apparently they also like to eat the fruit that grows in the danger zone.
That's a save point over there. I
Like,
don't
this
think
is
I
their
can
definition
I think
of fun,
I gotta
and they just
restore it,
love
though.
it. I
Look at it,
highly recommend you don't do this, you know, for a number of obvious
I need
reasons.
memory
Starting
again.
off this countdown, we have the sarcophagus. Basically, this is a massive steel and concrete structure that covers the Chernobyl power plant. It was designed to help contain the radiation. The construction of the structure lasted for 206 days, and those working on it had to work in shifts of no more than 7 minutes.
we need to
Any
work
more
on
time
ourselves
spent near
more
the
than other
reactors
things,
would
man.
have killed them. But still, they did sacrifice their lives building this because thousands of workers still died from exposure to the radiation. Those that survived got severely ill, and majority of them developed cancer. Nowadays, the sarcophagus is still there, but it's beginning to crumble. In 2019, they were in the process of dismantling it because it was going to collapse. So a new one is currently being installed. That's probably probably the scariest thing in Chernobyl because of how deadly the building it's containing is. Coming in at number 9, we have the gas masks. And if you guys are liking this video or want to see part 3, then smash that like button. Chernobyl already looks like the place where an apocalypse occurred. Buildings are completely abandoned, run down, and overgrown with nature. What doesn't help is the piles upon piles of gas masks scattered all throughout Chernobyl. This really adds to the eeriness of this place. And again, makes it look like a place where a zombie or alien takeover occurred. In fact, there is one room inside a school which is just completely filled with child-sized gas masks. It's very creepy, but also sad. Like, imagine how frightened the young children were when this happened. The gas masks found there are just a sad reminder of the horrors that took place there when the reactor exploded. Moving on to number 8, we have the rotting toys. Littered all throughout the city are toys or personal belongings people had to leave behind. The saddest thing to see are pictures of children's toys left behind. Like, I just think that was probably someone's favorite little dolly. Go anywhere there and you'll find items scattered everywhere, now broken and covered in filth. Like, imagine you're rushed out of your home and have to leave behind all your personal belongings. That must have been so hard. I can't imagine how everyone must have felt. It's really depressing to think about. Moving on at number 7, we have the examination chair. So this one is pretty strange, but somehow a gynecologist examination chair ended up in the middle of the woods outside of a hospital. Not only is that super weird, but it's also super creepy. It's all rusted and beat up and looks like an old torture device. Not only that, but that means someone had to go inside the abandoned hospital, find that chair, and then carry it all the way back down and into the woods. I got a lot of questions. Why would someone do this? And how long did it take them to do this? And again, why would someone do this? Either way, it makes for a very spooky encounter. Moving on at number 6, we have the abandoned cooling tower. A partially constructed cooling tower can be found at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. They were built to evaporate the cooling water from the 2 new reactors. Sadly, they were never completed. Now, these things are massive. The diameter was over 120 meters and it stands at 150 meters tall. Obviously, after the accident, there was no need to continue on with the construction of this, so the government just left the towers there along with everything else.
You know,
Eventually,
his
over time,
abilities
nature
also,
will have its way with it, and it will start to erode and crumble. It's just crazy seeing all these abandoned infrastructures. Imagine how life would have been if that explosion never happened. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the toxic river. There's a river that's just filled with radioactive water right near the reactor. Scariest part is, despite how toxic the water is, a bunch of aquatic life live there. In particular, giant catfish. Yes, giant catfish. A video from 2016 shows a massive catfish swimming in the water. People originally were like, oh my god, what the heck is that? It must be some sort of mutated animal. Later, it was just found out to be a giant catfish. But still, what the heck? And it's the fact that they have adapted to be able to survive in that highly toxic water. Like, that just baffles me. Not only that, but they can thrive there because the water has no higher predators. Obviously though, you're not allowed to go fishing there. Okay, I feel like that's a given, but I also feel like people would still try it, so I'm just gonna say it. Don't go fishing there. In our 4th spot, we have the jarfish. Speaking of fish, we're gonna go with this. So back in 2016, photographer and journalist Miriam Wazer took a trip to explore the ruins of Chernobyl. While inside an abandoned building, she came across something very creepy and odd. She found a bunch of fish and other specimens in jars. Why someone was collecting fish, it just baffles many. And they weren't even like proper beakers or science mason jars. No, it looked like someone emptied out their jar of pickles and then used it to store the specimen. I think it's best if those remain untouched. Like, can you imagine how stinky they would be if they were open nowadays? They would reek. Old stinky fish is not something I would ever want to handle. Now, the other specimen beside the fish are unknown. No one knows what the heck they are. But if you know, let me know in the comments below. Coming in at number 3, we have the abandoned hospitals. The hospitals at Chernobyl are quite eerie. They're just filled with rusted, empty hospital beds, littered syringes.
Opera GX. Trying to play a game while you're watching your favorite YouTuber on the side, and then boom, your game starts lagging because your soy boy web browser is hogging all your resources. I mean, look at this fatty. Everybody point and laugh. Opera GX, however, lets you say, enough. See this magical panel, right? This is where you can limit the amount of CPU or RAM your browser is using, boosting performance, taking your gaming to the next level. If that wasn't enough, they have GX Mods, located right here on your sidebar. If you want to go shopping for all of these delicious mods, you can find the store to do some browsing right here, letting you customize your browser down to the individual cells. You can change all of these things right here. I found this Deep Rock Galactic mod pack that replaces every single keyboard press with a gun sound. So now I always feel like I'm fighting back these glyphids. I also found a way to make it so every time I open a tab, it says it even has sounds for closing tabs. Pretty sick. You can mix and match all of these mods to create a truly custom experience catered to your needs. So what are you waiting for?
Hat aber nichts mit Magie zu tun, sondern mit Mathematik. Frau Kuhn, ich habe ein riesiges Problem.
Haben Sie einen Beweis? Eltern haben doch ein Recht darauf zu erfahren, was wirklich passiert ist.
Vielleicht sind sie auch überfordert.
Spitzelung, Denunziation, Verleumdung.
The Teacher's Lounge, rated PG-13. Now playing select cities, only in theaters.
And more. The walls and floors are cracking, and there's dirt and questionable red marks on the floor. I think the saddest thing, though, is that these hospitals are often trashed with medical supplies just tossed everywhere. The days after the explosion happened, people were frantically rushing to hospitals. Hospital staff were overwhelmed by the amount of people there. This moment is still preserved in the hospitals to this day. It's pretty dark once you think about it. And at number 2 today, we have the Sad Alley. The Sad Alley, or the Alley of Memory, is an alley in the Ukraine created in memory of the villages and residents who had to flee from their homes during the disaster. Basically, it's a walkway with signs lining the sides. These signs are names of cities and villages that had to evacuate and leave everything behind. It's a way to ensure we just never forget the impact that this disaster had. It's really sad. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the radioactive spiders. Yes, you heard me correctly. Imagine if Peter Parker got bit by one of these bad guys. He'd be like a weirdly mutated Spider-Man or something like that. But anyways, the spiders in the exclusion zone are radioactive. So you definitely don't want to be bit by one. Oh wait, it gets worse. They also make radioactive webs. Yeah, you heard me, that's a thing. So you don't have to just worry about these spiders, but you have to worry about walking through their deadly webs. Like, what the heck? No thank you, nuh-uh. I'm not a fan of spiders, but imagine radioactive ones. That sounds like it belongs in a horror movie. Radioactive, radioactive.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the reactor visit. This is a story that was told by a nuclear physicist from New York, Andrei Karsukov, and he told this story after he visited Chernobyl in 1997. During this visit, he went to the power station around 7:30 a.m. and he went into what was left of reactor number 4. This is where the explosion occurred. He began to take some radiation level readings, but suddenly he began to hear someone scream. He said, quote, "I ran upstairs to tell someone, but they said that when I entered the reactor control room, I was the first person to open that door in 3 years, and the only way to get inside the old reactor is through the doors I came in through. If someone had gone inside the reactor when I was not looking, they would have tripped an alarm that goes off when the reactor door is opened mechanically. The reactor door requires a password and a handprint, yet someone or something was inside." Later that evening, as we were eating dinner outside the building by the river next to the plant, a floodlight turned on in the room of the installation. There was no way anyone could be inside. As we ate, we figured there was a power surge or something. Then, just as my colleague said that, the light turned off. Maybe the reactor itself is now haunted by the souls who lost their lives as a result of the meltdown. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Chernobyl ghosts. While you can visit certain parts of Chernobyl today that have been deemed safe, taking a trip may not be for everyone, or perhaps it's too far, or whatever 100 reasons there are for not visiting the site. But with the technology we have now, there's another way you can visit the site, and that is through trusty old Google Maps. Many internet people have walked through the streets of the exclusion zone, searching around, seeing what photos Google Maps holds. But with those virtual tours comes something that is absolutely terrifying people, and that is the apparent sightings of what is referred to as the ghosts of Chernobyl. People have reported seeing shadowy figures, sometimes even faces in the abandoned buildings left in the exclusion zone, and I have to admit, some of the screenshots I've seen are pretty terrifying. Do you believe these are real ghosts caught on camera, or is it just a legend like many of the other things on today's list? In our number 8 spot today, we have the Blackbird. People in the district of the Ukraine that houses Chernobyl have told stories of sightings of the Blackbird for years, and it is perhaps the most well-known legend that comes from the area. The Blackbird is a human creature with wings and piercing red eyes, and it was apparently seen by workers at the Chernobyl plant on the fateful day of the nuclear disaster. After this, it was reported that anyone who had seen the bird would later report suffering from terrible nightmares and begin receiving threatening phone calls. Many of the people where the legend originates from, unfortunately, were at the center of the disaster and have since passed away from the radiation poisoning, so no one is sure if the Blackbird really is out there or not. The Blackbird is said to be a symbol of something terrible being afoot, so seeing it is definitely not a great thing to happen to a person. I think it's probably just another one to add to the list of reasons why maybe a Chernobyl visit isn't the best idea. I don't know, okay? It's for your health. In our number 7 spot today, we have the government cover-up. Of course, a disaster like this is going to get some government conspiracies swirling around it, and this little ditty suggests that the Chernobyl disaster was actually conducted by the Soviet government due to the failure of a new, at the time, huge missile defense radio structure called Duga-3. This structure, that actually exists in real life, is suspected of having been wildly over budget, and it was the source of many complaints after it was built. The systems were extremely powerful and broadcast in shortwave radio bands. They would appear without warning and sounded like a sharp, repetitive tapping noise, and they would disrupt things like legitimate broadcasts, amateur radio, commercial aviation communications, and utility transmissions, which all led to there being international complaints, and at the time, people didn't know what it was. This strange noise actually would go on to gain the tower the nickname Woodpecker for an idea of what the sound sounded like. Because of the fact that people didn't know where the sound was coming from, it led them to think that the signal was actually being used for things such as Soviet mind control or weather control experiments. So the story suggests that in order to eliminate it, the nearby Chernobyl facility was allowed to go into meltdown. It seems like they probably could have done something much less lethal and much less damaging, so I'm not exactly sure how true this one could possibly be, but there are definitely people out there who believe it. In our number 6 spot today, we have the spiders. The spiders that are residing within the exclusion zone are, of course, radioactive, but it's not only the spiders that are now dangerous to touch, it's also their webs. Spiders in Chernobyl are literally making radioactive webs, which is the stuff straight out of a comic book. These radioactive webs are also being woven in much different ways than they once were, which would suggest, of course, some sort of genetic mutation is at play. Spiders were already a creature I'd like to stay far away from. I feel just like tingly talking about them, but radioactive spiders adds a whole new level. Not only are the spiders now dangerous for non-radioactive animals to touch, but walking through their web is equally as dangerous to those who aren't thriving in the radiation. So not only do you have to watch out for regular old radioactive material, but now also get the never-ending construction of radioactive webs. That's amazing. It's so great. In our number 5 spot today, we have the alien invasion. Okay, it seems absolutely insane, but there is an alien conspiracy that actually revolves around Chernobyl, and there are people who believe it's true. There's part of this theory that I like, and that is because it basically suggests that aliens saved humanity. Yeah, in this story, they didn't cause disaster or try to steal our planet, and instead, they saved us from a complete and total meltdown. What happened, and how this all started, is that around the same time of the Chernobyl disaster, people reported spotting a number of UFOs. One witness even said that they saw a UFO for 6 hours. So basically, because of this uptick in sightings, people believe that the aliens came to help sort of of diffuse some of the radiation levels that were seen after the disaster. This would have helped to prevent an even larger blast with an even higher amount of death and illness. This is sort of a conspiracy brought up to explain how, while this meltdown was of course catastrophic, it didn't leave like apocalypse.
Hey there, it's Mandy from Sprizzy. In this video, I'll show you how to set up your first Sprizzy campaign. We're going to set up a Sprizzy campaign using my brand new yoga channel, Bendy Buddies. If you're not familiar with Sprizzy, it's a service that creates YouTube ads to help you get more views, subscribers, and engagement for your channel. And now, let's get started. The first thing we need to do is create an account. It's super easy. You can use your Google login to sign up. Just click the Sign In with Google button and choose your channel. Once you're logged in, your channel's videos should automatically be listed. If not, don't worry, just click Add Channel and your videos will appear. Now, let's select a video you'd like to promote. I suggest choosing a video that has already performed well for your channel. If you're new, just choose the video that represents your channel the best. Once you've selected your video, it's time to complete a few easy steps. The first step has some optional settings, but I recommend leaving them as they are. Click Next to go to the most important step, the targeting. In this step, you'll give Sprizzy the information it needs to target the right audience with your ad. Let's start by adding a few keywords. My video is for beginners to learn about yoga, so I'm going to tell Sprizzy to target people who are searching for yoga for beginners and learning yoga. Remember, it's best to be specific. Don't just use general phrases like working out or losing weight. This way, you'll reach people who are actually interested in your video. Also, you don't need too many keywords, but I recommend using at least 5. This will give Sprizzy a good idea of what your video is about.
What the fuck is this? Because this is not
Next up
cool
are
stuff.
similar channels and videos. This is optional, but it'll help Sprizzy better understand who your audience is. Sprizzy will even try to target people who are subscribers and viewers of these channels, so be specific. Sprizzy can recommend placements for you, or you can select your own.
Oh my god.
If you scroll down, you'll find a few other options. I
Imagine
recommend
dying
leaving
from a
them
bunch
to
of
their
bugs.
default settings unless you want to target specific demographics or locations. The final step is to set your budget and any scheduling for your promotion. Here's how Sprizzy's pricing works. You pay a few cents for each viewer they
Damn.
find for your video. Your
I hate when they be
campaign
stuck in
ends
their
when your
viewpoints in
budget
this
is
game
used up.
sometimes, but you know
You
what?
can always increase your budget
I need
later
to
if
calm
you want
down
to
more,
test
you know?
with a smaller amount.
I guess it helps you learn
For
patience.
delivery speed, I suggest starting with the slower
A
option
compound
if it's your first
extra. Let's see
campaign.
what the fuck that is.
This will give you plenty of time to keep an eye on
Let's
the
see
campaign.
what they get them
Plus,
fine
the
pants
more
up.
time Sprizzy has to promote your video, the better they can
Get
find
over
the
here.
perfect audience.
Stop going over there eating stuff.
Once you're done, click Save and Continue. Now that you've submitted your video, Sprizzy's team will process it and build your promotion and ads on YouTube. You'll receive an email when this process is completed, but it usually only takes a few hours. Congratulations! You've successfully set up your first Sprizzy campaign. Now sit back and watch your video reach a new audience and grow your channel.
Go to dot. You better go. You better go. Here it comes.
Apocalyptic level damage, which believers of this theory said there should have been. So what do we think? Did aliens come to save the planet? In our number 4 spot today, we have The Musician. This is a story that comes from a
Not
Redditor
yet,
named
but I'll
Jake,
be
but this
back,
actually isn't
yeah.
Jake's story. This is the story of a man named Yuri who Jake met at a bar in Finland. Yuri is actually a Chernobyl survivor, and he had quite the harrowing tale to share with Jake. Yuri is a musician, and at the time of the disaster, he was
Throw
in
the
a
dot. Throw the dot,
state-sponsored
you can go to
musical
the
dance
geyser.
troupe. Basically, as soon as the disaster happened, this group was called upon by the government to come in and calm the people living in the area. Yuri said, quote, "Mere hours after the meltdown commenced, our bus entered the exclusion zone at checkpoint Dityatki. We were told not anything, and the soldiers made it forbidden for speaking with the village people. Imagine not knowing a disaster taking place, yet seeing the strange workings of the radioactivity all around. Everyone was sick and dying, yet quarantined and not allowed to leave the zone." This is all chilling, but this is where the story takes a terrifying turn. He begins to describe their final performance, which was in Pripyat. The ballerina danced, knowing something horrible had happened, and she danced like never before, and she even let her hair down from her bun to just let it flow. Suddenly, though, Yuri noticed that these locks of hair weren't just falling out of her bun, they were falling down to the ground. Basically, Yuri ends off his story by explaining his escape, which was through back roads and avoiding military checkpoints, and he ends off by saying that he is the only one of his group to survive. In our number 3 spot today, we have barn swallows. Any animal who lives in the exclusion zone has to have been affected by the disaster, and that includes those who spend most of their time in the sky. I'm obviously talking about birds. The barn swallows in Chernobyl are one animal who have seen a change in their physical appearance that has lasted all of the years since the nuclear meltdown. It is unclear why these birds have been affected greater than their land animal counterparts, or if these changes will ever reverse to their previous state, but here's what they are currently dealing with. The swallows appeared to have severely deformed beaks, disproportionate feathers, some had partial albinism, and they were seen to have had much smaller brains. Of course, some of these issues are much worse than others, and I'm sure these changes have significantly affected their ways of life, but of course, they continue to adapt as time goes on. It is sad that this human-made disaster has affected them in such a negative way, but the fact that they are still around really shows their adaptability and their resilience. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Chernobyl zombies. This little legend that comes from within the exclusion zone claims that after the Chernobyl disaster, we of course know that unfortunately people lost their lives, but what happened if those who did then became the undead? We're obviously talking about zombies here. There are plenty of legends that suggest the exclusion zone isn't dangerous and off limits because of the toxic radiation, but actually because there are brain-eating zombies wandering the area. I mean, I personally have never received a lethal dose of radiation, so I cannot confirm nor deny that this would turn one into a zombie, but I'm gonna go ahead and call this one most likely fake. I mean, at least I am really hoping it is. We're dealing with enough as a society. We don't need zombies on the list. This little legend can most likely be attributed to a video game that takes place in the exclusion zone, but it certainly is not based on any real-life facts, at least that we know of. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have The Stalkers. Speaking of that video game, which is called Stalker, it might have inspired the tales of the zombies, but it also apparently has inspired some to try and sneak into the exclusion zone themselves. This popular game, set in the zone, has made some people try and sneak into it themselves in real life in order to live out the game. You know, like a LARPing scenario, but the only enemy this time is radiation. Basically, there are these people who are now being referred to as stalkers, and they are said to be sort of romanticizing the exclusion zone. They like to sneak in, explore the ruins, sleep in the abandoned buildings, and sometimes even bring in a device to show them how much radiation they're being exposed to, which is pretty frightening. Despite these dangerous explorers sharing their nickname with the video game, however, the name actually comes from characters in the novel Roadside Picnic, which was turned into a classic Soviet film entitled Stalker, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky. The term stalker is meant to refer to thieves who sneak into places that are harboring lethal secrets. Some even tried to tempt fate even more by doing things like eating fruit that they found growing in the zone. Because of the fact that this place is meant to be off limits, many of those sneaking in here who consider themselves stalkers wear things like paramilitary gear, they wear gas masks, balaclavas, and other things to cover their face. All in all, it's very dangerous and also very unsettling.
Number 10, ghosts. It was a ghost who did the whole thing. Now everything makes sense. There's no way anything could go wrong in the powerhouse known as the USSR unless there was something supernatural afoot. No, I'm just messing with you. I'm not talking about ghosts pre-explosion, but ghosts after the power plant decided to go kaboom. People say that the site is now haunted by people who lost their lives in the explosion. One scientist who visited the site in 1997 said he could hear someone screaming from inside the reactor room that they were being burned alive. But the reactor room had been sealed shut, and there's no way anyone could get in without a fingerprint scan and a password. So that means there could be some radioactive ghosts just chilling around Chernobyl. That kind of sounds how you make like a second-tier Batman villain. Number 9, the CIA did it. After the release of the critically acclaimed HBO series Chernobyl, I really can't stress enough how much you guys need to watch the show. It's so good. It's literally the highest rated show of all time. What more do you want? Anyways, after the TV series came out, the Russian government released a statement that the TV show was anti-Soviet Union propaganda and that they were going to make their own TV series telling the real story about how the reactor melted down because the CIA sabotaged it, and it was all America's fault. This is some major tea on both sides. They're spilling tea about each other. Will Russia and the USA ever learn to get along? Are we going to have to listen to the two of them complain about each other until the end of time? We should just get these two countries to kiss and get it over with. There has been unbroken sexual tension between these two since Rocky IV. Just start playing nice already, please. Number 8. The Soviet Union sacrificed soldiers. So rumor has it that the Russians sent in robots to try and clean up the explosion site, put out fires, and contain the reactor. But the radiation was so harsh that all the robots broke down. So they went to the next best thing, soldiers. It said that soldiers were given an ultimatum to date me or I don't want to see you anymore. Wait, I'm thinking about the wrong unstable reactor. No, what the Russian government actually said was spend 2 minutes shoveling sand onto the exposed reactor or go fight in Afghanistan for 2 years. Really, the worst choice ever. Go fight in an intense war where a bunch of people are dying every day and your chances of coming back in one piece are slim to none, or for sure get radiation poisoning. Something interesting about the Russian soldiers who decided to shovel sand onto the exposed reactor, they were called liquidators because they would take shots of vodka before they went in. Vodka was thought to prevent any conditions related to radiation. We really knew nothing back in the day. Number 7, the land is safe to live on. Radiation is very bad, we all know this. Comic books have lied to us. Radiation does not give you any sort of superpowers. If you want superpowers, you need to be an alien or super rich. Those are the only ways. After the Chernobyl disaster, the radiation of the surrounding area was at unlivable levels, or that's at least what the government said. Some people from local villages didn't care, and after
Here's one thing you need to do before buying anything online. Don't spend another dime on Amazon until you watch this first. Watch this. I can show you how to get the sweetest deals online when you shop from major retailers like Amazon and Target. You can drop prices automatically. I can show you how, but I can't do it for you. People are saving real money doing this. $160 million in the last year. Across thousands of different retailers, you'll immediately see this. See what I mean? You'll see better prices you had no idea existed. And you don't even have to ask. They just show up automatically. Download this free tool that'll give you access to the deals. Just click, click. Done. That's it. Simple. It takes all of 10 seconds, and there's no need to enter any personal information. There's no technical mumbo jumbo. It's that easy. What are you waiting for? It takes less than 30 seconds to start saving. And this is all 100% free.
Every year we pray to celebrate next year in Jerusalem. Why wait until next year? Now, more than ever, let us celebrate this Seder night, united together in Jerusalem.
everything was said and done, they fought to go back to their homes. They wanted the right to live where they used to live, and they were granted freedom to do so. There are over 100 people living in the exclusion zone, and their life expectancy isn't any shorter than that of the average person. They grow crops, hunt animals, and even drink the water, all of which has recorded high levels of radiation. But no one seems to care or be affected by it. Maybe if someone has a baby born out of there, we'll get our first superhero. Just a little bit of radiation right out of the womb. Maybe that's the trick. Number 6. This could have changed the world. Even though there was an explosion at the Chernobyl plant, it wasn't a massive meltdown. It ruined the surrounding area, and the reactor site is still extremely dangerous, but it could have been much worse. If there was a total meltdown, like a Britney Spears 2007 shaving her head level meltdown, running around with Kevin Federline level meltdown, the world would have been a much different place. The nuclear fallout would have made Europe unlivable, and millions of people would have died. The Spice Girls would have never existed. It would have been a major bummer on epic proportions. And we can't really know how the whole world would have been affected by this. Maybe it would have only been Europe, but maybe it would have been the whole world getting hit by this nuclear fallout. Maybe all of us would have had to been raised in bunkers just like the Fallout games, and only resurfaced to find super mutants and three-headed dogs running around. And Thriller is still the #1 song on the charts. That actually sounds kind of cool. Number 5, Black Bird. So the Chernobyl disaster was caused by the mismanaging of the nuclear reactor. Or was it caused by a supernatural being known as the Black Bird? It is said that days leading up to the Chernobyl disaster, people saw a huge black winged creature with glowing red eyes. People believe that it was some sort of demonic entity that came to bring a dark omen to the area. Good news for the Chernobyl scientists, it wasn't their fault at all that the reactor blew. It wasn't because I'm bad at my job, it's just because a mythical beast came to spread dark energy, and he did it in the form of a nuclear reactor meltdown. Duh. Some people who were on the site at the time of the explosion said that they saw a dark winged creature flying out of the fire. From now on, that's what I'm gonna do anytime I screw up royally. I'm gonna blame the whole thing on a monster. Did you just rear end me? No. Are you stupid? That was the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. I think you should be a little bit easy on him. When he was alive, cars didn't exist. There were just boxes attached to cars, okay? Number 4. Mutated animals. There's a theory that from the explosion, many of the animals who were in the radiation zone were affected by the blast and caused to mutate. There's even the taxidermied body of a deformed piglet on display at the Chernobyl Museum. There hasn't been extensive research on the matter, so it's unsure if any cancer growth or defects that were found on animals were because of the blast or were gonna happen anyways. Now enough time has passed and so few humans visit the area that the animal population has actually increased. I would say that the Chernobyl disaster caused the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and that they're actually Russian, but TMNT actually came out 2 years before the disaster happened. I guess the Chernobyl version of TMNT would be middle-aged Chernobyl scientist human in great pain. Number 3, the meltdown was a cover-up. Take out your makeup wipes, girl, because we got to uncover some tea. I think that should be my new catchphrase. Well, this is some major tea about the Chernobyl disaster. There's a rumor that the whole thing was a cover-up for a failed secret experiment known as Project Woodpecker. Project Woodpecker was a giant set of radio towers that were supposed to give the Soviet government the ability to detect nuclear missiles before they were launched. If this thing was to work, it would be huge. They could know where other countries were keeping their warheads and if other countries were lying about having nukes at all. But the project failed, and because the people working on the project were so afraid of what would happen to them if the higher-ups found out about the failure, it's said that they orchestrated something that would distract everyone from the problem and also destroy the problem. Pretty sneaky plan, but kind of a long shot. Too many things would have to go perfectly right for this to be true, but if it is true, it's some major tea. Number 2, the meltdown was caused by the KGB. Girl, if you thought the last one was hot, I got some scorching tea for you. There have been rumors that the whole Chernobyl meltdown was a plot by the KGB to control Europe. By causing the reactor to explode, it would strike fear into the rest of Europe when it came to building their own nuclear power plants. After the whole world was watching as a reactor melted down and almost destroyed the entire continent, not a single soul would get in line to buy a shiny new power plant. Instead, all of Europe would have to rely on Russia for energy, since they have a huge amount of natural resources. This would give Russia an insane level of power for the unforeseeable future. This is hot tea. And number 1 on our list, UFO heroes. Alright, it's time to go way off the rocker with these theories. I was able to dig up some reports of people saying they saw UFOs that helped stop the reactor from becoming a major disaster. Mikhail Vartisky was there on the day that the reactor went, and he said he saw several glowing objects fly over the broken reactor. He then saw a beam of red light shoot out from the glowing object, and then it flew away. People believe that some alien friends came down to have our back in this terrible time of need. They were like humans invented tacos. We must save them.
Began to grow once people heard of the nearby gold deposits and discoveries. As the town grew, there wasn't sufficient law enforcement, which meant that there were a lot of vigilantes out there looking to take the law into their own hands. This led to many people who were suspected of being traveling robbers being hanged by said vigilante groups. By the time the 1940s rolled around, the town was in ruins. Charles and Sue Bovey ended up coming and buying up all the property they could, and the town now remains a tourist site, but not without some ghostly tales to spice up the story. One of the most well-known ghosts is that of a tall man in a blue Civil War soldier's coat, and he is often said to be found walking around the town's boardwalk at night, smoking as he strolls. Another one of the most famous sightings is that of a woman and a young girl. Little is known about their story, but they are often sighted by tourists. In our number one spot today, we have Deer Lodge. Deer Lodge at the old Montana Territorial Prison, now known as the Old Prison Museum, once held prisoners for over 100 years. It apparently was quite a lousy place during that time that was full and overcrowded and had terrible food, and it was just a very dangerous place. Many inmates took each other's lives here, and with all of the stories from when this was a prison, it's just clear that if any place were to be haunted, it would absolutely be this one. There even was a huge riot that broke out in 1959. Since this prison closed down in the 1970s, the tales haven't become any less grim. Visitors report hearing eerie noises, and some have even felt the sensation of being touched. Many people believe that the ghost of convicted killer Paul Eitner, known as Turkey Pete, still haunts cell number 1. He was incarcerated at the prison for 49 years before he passed away in 1967.
Starting off at number 10 is the Old Washoe Club. What was once a high-class bar reserved for the wealthiest men in Virginia City, Nevada, is now one of the most haunted places in the state. You see, as the riches dwindled, so did the clientele that began to roam around, and soon enough, anyone with cash for a beer was welcome inside the saloon. And it didn't take long before the bar became a frequent hotspot visited by Johns looking for a cheap night of fun away from their wives. However, along with the new nightlife, the new patrons also brought lots of violence, with bar fights becoming a near nightly incident. The next thing you know, bar fights turned into fights with the working ladies. These women were being killed by the patrons if they wouldn't give them what they wanted. Today, the building is mostly used for commercial properties, but many ghosts have been reported haunting the once wealthy halls, especially the ghost of Lena. Legend has it that Lena was once one of the girls working in the bedrooms back in the day, and tragically she was killed by one of the Johns on the 3rd floor. But she's not the only ghost who roams the halls, as allegedly the man who killed Lena felt such guilt over what he did that he took his own life the very next day on the 2nd floor. To this day, his ghost is seen walking around looking for Lena and sometimes even crying out her name. Next up at number 9, the Clown Motel. There are a few things that rival my fear of dolls, but if there is one thing that comes close, it would probably be clowns. So a motel that's entire theme and brand is that it's filled head to toe with clowns actually sounds like my nightmare. I mean, how do people sleep in a room where creepy clown paintings and figurines stare at them in the dark? I will never understand. But to make matters even worse, it's not just filled with freaky and terrifying clowns. I mean, truly, that would be enough for me, but this place doubles down as a haunted motel as well. Long before the clown-filled motel opened its doors, this corner of town was reserved for the local graveyard. Being the Wild West and all, between the mining incidents and just general dangerous lifestyles, in about 10 years the cemetery was filled to capacity with 300 corpses. And it seems the spirits of these lost souls like to roam around the nearby hotel, terrifying guests as if clowns weren't getting the job done already. Patrons of the motel today frequently report seeing strange occurrences around the motel, such as hearing strange voices or doors slamming shut seemingly out of nowhere. So unless you are a clown-loving ghost enthusiast with a glutton for punishment, then I would suggest looking for a different place to stay on your visit. Coming in at number 8, the Pioneer Saloon. Opened in 1913, the Pioneer Saloon is the oldest bar in southern Nevada, and oh boy does it have a history. In its heyday, the saloon was no stranger to a bar fight, and as a result there are quite a few bullet holes lining the walls. But that is not the worst of it. It's said American actor Clark Gable frequented this establishment and was here waiting for Carol Lombard the night that a search party went out looking for her after a nearby plane crash. But the most tragic story is that of the bartender, who's said to have taken his own life right before a full house of patrons. As a result, many have said that the Pioneer Saloon is home to a whole mess of spirits. Of course, most famously the bartender, but also an entity referred to as Ruby, and even the ghost of Carol Lombard herself. Over the years, many paranormal investigators have popped in hoping to snag a recording of a strange noise or catch an unusual sighting on video, and believe it or not, they all claim to have been successful. But it's not just the experts. Patrons of the bar too claim to see doors slam shut or hear gunshots at night. But nothing is as scary as the apparition of the lonely bartender, who's said to terrify even the most skeptical guests who visit. Coming in at number 7, Yellow Jacket Mine. Widely believed to be the most haunted place across Nevada, this terrifying mine got its claim to fame over 150 years ago. Back in 1869, during the early hours of the morning, a huge fire broke out inside the mine, spreading up to the 800-foot level. Completely unaware, the day crew began their workday descending into the mine, and soon burning.
I'm treating this like a murder case. But some questions just don't have answers.
Timbers started collapsing around them, trapping them inside. Despite firefighters arriving on the scene, the water pressure wasn't strong enough to extinguish the fire, and so the blaze continued for the next 3 weeks. Tragically, 39 miners lost their lives inside, but the strange thing is that only 34 bodies were ever recovered. Many over the years have wondered where the remains of the missing miners have gone, but one thing is for sure, all the men's spirits have stayed behind to haunt any who step foot on the property. Today, while you can't enter the mine itself, those that visit the area have reported seeing blue and white orbs floating around the main entrance. But most frightening of all are the screams and cries that can be heard echoing from the tunnels below. Coming in at number 6, Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum. It may be a popular tourist attraction for Las Vegas visitors, but that doesn't mean it's not also a terrifyingly haunted museum. If you don't already know, Zach Bagan was once one of America's most famous TV ghost hunters and spent years collecting some of the most creepy, evil, and possessed trinkets this world has to offer. So what's an ex-ghost hunter to do with all his haunted memorabilia? Why, make a haunted museum, of course. If you dare visit the museum today, you'll find the items encased in glass and behind velvet ropes to keep you from touching them. But that doesn't stop the frightening spirits that haunt them from freaking out the patrons anyways. Inside the museum are 30 rooms, each filled with cursed items and riddled with haunted spirits, such as haunted dolls, a cursed rocking chair that is believed to be the inspiration behind the actual haunting in the movie The Conjuring, and the original Diebook box. The Diebook box, for those that are not aware, is believed to be the most haunted object on the planet. The Diebook originates from Jewish folklore and is an evil entity that will possess the living and never leave. And as the legend goes, you are never to open the Diebook box, otherwise the entity will escape and wreak havoc on anyone in its path. Coming in at number 5, the Hoover Dam. This popular tourist destination spanning the Colorado River between Arizona and Nevada is revered as a spectacular feat of engineering. The construction on this behemoth began back in 1931 and it took 5 years to complete. But make no mistake, the history of this dam is not a squeaky clean slate. In fact, it's said that a whopping 112 people died during its construction, and that each and every one of them haunts the dam to this day. And if that wasn't dark enough, rumor has it that some of the workers who fell to their deaths were actually permanently encased in the dam's concrete. While the concrete may encase their physical bodies, their spirits are said to roam the grounds, terrifying anyone who they come into contact with. Many believe the spirits are angry to have lost their lives to the project and are there to take revenge on those who reap the benefits they never got to. Visitors and staff alike have reported cold spots, flickering electricity, equipment malfunctions, and finding missing items turn up in completely inexplicable places as soon as they are on the property. So just be careful if you ever decide to stop on by. You never know what could happen. Next up at number 4, the Overland Hotel and Saloon. Back in the day, the county of Pioche was a near lawless pit filled with danger and bloodshed. Over the years, it's said 72 souls were laid to rest across the county, and it's believed they all remain haunting the grounds to this day. Nicknamed Nevada's liveliest go town, Pioche might have a tamer facade during the day, but at night it's just as wild as it was back in the day. But the most terrifying spot of them all is said to be the Overland Hotel and Saloon. Although the Overland that stands today was rebuilt after a tragic fire in 1948, the spirits that haunt the grounds were not deterred. In fact, some say they even came back with a vengeance. So much so that a few years back, a crew for the TV show Ghost Adventures decided to try their hand and check out the rumors for themselves, and as they tell it, they recorded some of the most successful interactions with spirits at this hotel than anywhere else to date. To be clear, successful for a paranormal investigator pretty much translates to a thing of nightmares for anyone else. To top it off, guests continuously report witnessing shadowy figures lurking in the corners and slamming doors. And some guests even say they've been physically shaken by spirits until they awake. In fact, this place is so haunted that staff say you need to tell them if you want to avoid ghosts, as there are only a few select rooms that the spirits tend to stay away from. That being said, you are never truly safe from their presence. Coming in at number 3, the Silver Queen Hotel. Built back in 1876, the Silver Queen is just about the oldest hotel in the state, and not much has changed since the days it opened its doors. Beautifully restored to maintain its 19th century authenticity, it's not just the brass hardware that has stayed since the early days, but some of the patrons too. The most famous of which is the ghost of Rosie, believed to be the spirit of a woman of the night who was a frequent and favorite patron of the Silver Queen Hotel in its heyday, but who tragically took her own life in the very hotel she worked in. As the story goes, a few of her clients became violent towards her, and Rosie, depressed and seeing no way out of this life, decided to end it herself in her bathtub of room 11. To this day, it's said room 11 is haunted by her ghost, and those that have stayed there say they routinely hear rattling doorknobs, phantom footsteps, and disembodied voices echo throughout. But she isn't alone. Other frightening ghosts have also made their appearance in the wedding chapel's night cameras, and visitors swear to hear footsteps that sound like clacking along a wooden floor, despite that the hallways are carpeted. I mean, it's just creepy from top to bottom. Next up in our number 2 spot, the Goldfield Hotel. Although it now stands abandoned and boarded up, back in 1908 it was one of the hottest hotels in town, and it certainly has a spicy legend. As the story goes, back in the day there was a young woman named Elizabeth who caught the eye of owner George Wingfield. George became quite smitten with the lady and frequently swung by her room for a nighttime visit. However, Elizabeth soon fell pregnant, and George, concerned for his reputation and business, lured her into room 109 at the hotel under false pretenses. Once inside, he chained Elizabeth to the radiator and forced her to stay in the room alone until she gave birth. But tragically, Elizabeth died in the room, and so George took it upon himself to deal with her. Her situation, allegedly throwing it down a nearby mine shaft. Those who pass by the old hotel today say they can hear the sound of chains clanking against the radiator, and that Elizabeth can be seen walking around room 109 wearing a long white dress and weeping. Some even say they've heard her cries echo in the streets. But it's not just the weeping Elizabeth that haunts these evil halls, but the spirit of a former employee who took their life, as well as George himself. It's believed George remains there, tormenting the poor Elizabeth even in her death, making this place more and more evil as the hours go by. And last up in our number 1 spot is Circus Circus. Since its opening in 1968, Circus Circus has become one of the most famous hotel and casinos in Las Vegas. Over the years, it has of course been the meeting place of countless guests, but it has also been the location of a multitude of crimes, including multiple brutal killings. Most notorious is the tragic case of a mother and son who were found dead in room 123 in what appeared to be a brutal case of the mother taking his life and then her own. No one knows what led the mother to do such a thing, but it's said the pair frequently wander the hotel, and at night the loud screams are often heard echoing throughout the hall. Most terrifying though are the reports of people who have stayed in the room, as apparently the words "Help me" have appeared on numerous occasions scrawled across the bathroom mirror. But it wasn't just brutal killings among family members that went down in these hallowed halls. Believe it or not, there was also apparently a deep affiliation with the American mobster Anthony John Spilotro, who was put in charge of the gift shop to cover for his illegal business dealings. As you can imagine, with mobsters frequenting the establishment, there was quite a lot of bloodshed going on in the shadows, and so many of the other ghosts are suspected to have been the victims of Spilotro and his men. However, some even believe Spilotro himself, who was brutally killed by his employer, haunts the halls hoping to get revenge on the very people who put him in the grave all those years ago.
Number 10, Bragg Road, Saratoga. The Big Thicket in southeast Texas is a dense forested area that runs along the Alabama border, and there are very few roads that cut through it. One of the most infamous is Bragg Road. In 1904, the road was built as a rail line to connect the now abandoned town of Bragg to the now thriving Saratoga. While the rails have long since been torn up, some ghostly reminders of the past still remain. When you drive down this lonely 8-mile-long dirt road at night, you, like thousands of others before you, are sure to see what are known as the ghost lights. Basketball-sized orbs of light that float and dance through the air, even changing in color according to some. There are a few stories on what these lights actually are. The most popular story is that a tragedy occurred on a midnight train run. The conductor, sleep-deprived from a long journey through the state, needed some fresh air to wake himself up. He stuck his head out the window, and in a freak accident, he was decapitated by a tree. And now his spirit is wandering the road, searching for his lost head. The other prevailing theory is that the light is a ghostly lantern belonging to a groom whose bride left him at the altar. He went searching for her in the forest at night, but has still never found her to this day. Number 9, Baker Hotel, Mineral Wells. Mineral Wells is known for its, you guessed it, mineral-rich water. In the 1880s, people would travel from all over Texas to drink some, and it supposedly had healing powers and could cure almost any ailment. And with that kind of tourist attraction, you need somewhere for all of these folks to stay. And so, in 1929, the Baker Hotel was opened. With 14 floors and 450 rooms, it was the biggest hotel for miles, and it used the mineral water as a draw for all sorts of people. To this day, workers and visitors alike find small things missing from their pockets or bags while touring the grounds, and workers have later found them on the floor in the Baker Suite, the room where the owner lived and died. They also report the smell of cigar smoke in the air, another habit of Mr. Baker, further proving his presence. But there are also some less friendly spirits here, notably that of the chopped bellhop, who lost his life in a freak elevator accident that saw his top half removed from the bottom half of his body. He's seen floating sans legs and screaming to be made whole again. Workers recommend you stay away. lest you meet the same fate. Known for its programs in engineering, technology, and agriculture, Texas A&M is one of the most highly regarded universities in the state. But the engineering building is home to not only future engineers, but the spirit of a former worker. In 1959, Roy Sims was the foreman for the meat locker in what was then the Animal Industries building. He was showing his assistant some tips on butchering bacon, and when the assistant stepped out to get them both some coffee, the knife slipped and Sims accidentally sliced his leg, severing his femoral artery in the process. The assistant returned to see Roy bleeding out on the floor and called an ambulance, but it was too late, and he passed away. Students and faculty alike report strange happenings in the building to this day. Noises and crashes, cool breezes when all the windows and doors are shut, and even objects moving or being out of place. And many attribute this to the ghost of Roy Sims just trying to get back to work. Number 7, Lake Highlands High School, Dallas. Imagine being back in high school, and during a rehearsal for the school play, the lights suddenly go out, and when they come back on, costumes have moved, props have crashed to the floor, and you see a ghostly apparition rise back up to the rafters. This is exactly what some students and faculty have reported at the Dallas High School. Reportedly, the ghost is that of a former student, Elizabeth, who took her own life jumping from the roof of the auditorium. While many attribute the cold spots and strange noises to the wind, there is no denying that there was a student named Elizabeth who attended the school around the same time the urban legend takes place and passed away, though the cause remains unclear. Number 6 on our list, the Ritz Theater in Corpus Christi. While there are no accounts of specific deaths associated with what was once South Texas's most beautiful theater, there are certainly enough ghostly happenings to make anyone's skin crawl. Paranormal investigators have reported that while walking through the now crumbling building, you can feel cold spots, hear voices, and see orbs floating through the air, some of which they've actually been able to catch on camera. Perhaps these are spirits who never managed to move on, or maybe they're happy right where they are, enjoying a pleasant night out at the theater in the afterlife. We won't know until somebody asks. Number 5, Jefferson Hotel, Jefferson. Originally built in 1851 as a cotton warehouse, the Jefferson Hotel has had haunting stories for decades. To this day, workers who were once skeptical of spirits have been converted to believers after dishes have gone flying, phantom footsteps were heard, and the front switchboard lit up as though the rooms were talking to each other, even when the hotel was closed to guests. Many attribute this to the ghost of Elizabeth, common ghost name I guess, who took her own life in the hotel after her soon-to-be husband sent a note that he would not be coming to the wedding. This has been verified by newspapers to have happened in the 1870s, and there have been sightings of a woman in white roaming the halls of the hotel ever since. Number 4, Hendley Row, Galveston. One of the oldest still operating commercial buildings in the city, Hendley Row has seen many occupants throughout its time. Most notably, it was a watchtower during the American Civil War. Some have reported a soldier on the roof of the building at night watching out for Union Army members. There are also many spirits who appear soaked and wet from the 1900 storm that they and 12,000 others lost their lives in. However, my favorite story from this building is actually more recent. The manager of the market was gifted a photo of Dr. Wilbur, a man who had lived and died in the buildings many, many years before, and they decided to hang it in the market as a historical artifact. When Hurricane Ike hit the city in 2008 and left the building in 10 feet of water, damaging so much of the property, the picture remained unharmed, despite falling in the water. During their annual Day of the Dead celebration, the photo is included on the altar, along with many other objects and candles. With a 3-person rotation to ensure it's done, the candles are extinguished at night. Yet every year, the candles are mysteriously already burning the next morning. Number 3, Haunted Train Tracks, San Antonio. On a dark night in 1936, at the rail crossing on Shane Road, just outside of San Antonio, a tragedy occurred which would rock the state to its core. An after-hours event at the local elementary school had many students staying late that night, and the school bus service was diverted till later in the evening. When it was time to go, students loaded up and headed home. Unfortunately,
this is what my first car looked like when I got it, and this is how I gave it a vibe shift with eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit.
for some, this would be their last ride. The bus had been working better than ever all evening, the bus driver noted, and suddenly it stalled out on the rail tracks. The driver tried and tried to restart the vehicle, but it was no use. Then suddenly, a train appeared. Its lamp must have been out, and it was too late to move the bus, even if it was working. The driver began to carry students off the bus as fast as he could, but then the bus was hit by the train side on, and the driver was thrown from the window.